Good morning. Welcome to the Pascual Project. I'm your host, Zeb Pascual. This is the third of what I'm planning to be called the Transplant Trilogy, where if you're listening to this right now, the first episode should have been my story. The second episode should be Kayla's story, the double lung transplant recipient that I met, and the third one is with someone very special to me. We met over 15 years ago. It was 2004 when it happened. Yeah, so like a long time ago, 15 years ago probably, and he's been very special in my life. We see each other on a very regular basis, and he is my renal doctor, my nephrology doctor, Dr. Abdeen. He's been with me through essentially the whole thing from when I had to go to Providence through the ER, and they found that my creatinine was like in the 13s or 14s or something like that, and they had to call a kidney doctor. And I remember specifically when I met him, he was this like large, imposing man. Like this is very tall, huge dude, and he came in, and the first thing I thought of when we were going through the options, because I was on a lot of drugs at the time, so it's kind of fuzzy, but I just remember wanting to go straight to the transplant. Like I didn't understand dialysis. I didn't understand what anything was, but I remember him just looking at me and just saying, "You need dialysis." And to me, I was like, okay, yeah, that's fine. I can do that, but I'm only going to do that because I want the transplant. And so I could see that, and I was really young. I was like 23, I think. And I could see that he was slightly amused and maybe horrified that I didn't understand how thorough and how much the dialysis was involved with dialysis. But nevertheless, he's been such a mainstay in this whole process, because in the life of a transplant recipient, there's a lot of discipline that's involved. There's a lot of compliance that's involved. There's things you have to do daily, and there's things you have to do every 3 or 4 months, and so on and so forth. I try my very best to be a model patient and everything. It doesn't always work, but if anything that's kept me going back, it's actually probably him. And but that's my first memory of him, and I've learned so much. I don't even know if he remembers that, but I've learned so much from him over the years. He's been a confidant and a mentor in a sense, and there's some stories that I'd love to share. Some formative events in my life that would not have happened were it not for his nudging, and not even him nudging me. It was me forcing him to nudge me, because I think I really needed it. So, and that was like 15 years ago. So he's watched me grow as a person, and he's helped me through a lot of my ventures and stuff. So I'm so honored to have him on the show. I honestly, when I asked him to come on, I had no idea if he was even allowed to come on, because I have other friends who are in banking and other friends who are in like finance who are straight up not allowed to even come on and talk. So I was kind of scared of that. I wasn't sure the extent to which he could or couldn't talk about, but fucking here we are. So I'm really excited. Dr. Abdeen, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Zeb. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. So it's funny because when I first started the show, I used to have this long outline and all these questions for the guests, and as I had it never went exactly as if the outline had like 10 questions, we'd only get through the first 2, and then the other 3 hours was just us talking about random bullshit. So in the last several episodes, I admit I haven't had an outline, because I think I've just done it enough, and I feel like if we just start with 1 or 2 questions, then it just kind of free flows from there. But Dr. Abdeen asked me for one, and I gave him one, and actually I'm really happy about it. But I would love to know. There's so many things that I think I personally would love to know, even though we've known each other for a long time, and that's important for my listeners to know as well. So let's start off with general background, like where are you, if you're allowed to, where are you from, and where'd you grow up?
So I was born in Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Okay.
A lot of people don't know that.
Yeah,
They're surprised by that.
That's 15 years.
And,
15 years of relationship.
They look at my name and look at me and the way I talk, and they say, "Wait, Chattanooga, Tennessee? Where's your southern accent?"
Yeah.
I never lived there. My family moved to California when I was very young, and so I grew up here. And my family, yes.
Okay.
And my family's from Syria. My mother and father are both from Syria, and they came here a long time ago in the '60s. And so I grew up in L.A. And but my place of birth is Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Yeah, that is. See,
I know.
It only took 15 years for me to figure out that's where he was born.
And then I went to undergrad at Cal Poly Pomona.
Okay.
And then I went to medical school at UC San Diego.
Okay.
And I did my training at UC San Diego as well.
Awesome.
And I was faculty there, in fact,
awesome.
for a couple of years.
Okay, so yeah, so the Tennessee thing makes zero sense, but the fact that his family is from Syria makes so much sense. If you are a sports fan or a MMA or wrestling person, and if you study the history of your sport, as I think everyone should, in wrestling circles, it goes back to almost like ancient Mesopotamian times, and there's pictures of like old school Middle Eastern wrestlers, like these ginormous dudes in like Speedos and holding clubs with like these strongman mustaches. So imagine that guy, but a doctor. Like that's Dr. Abdeen. So, okay, so let's talk about when did you know that you wanted to be a doctor?
Well, when I applied to college, and I pretty much knew I wanted to go into medicine. Mm-hmm. But at that time, I was told it was a daunting task, and that getting into medical school would be very, very difficult, very challenging. And I didn't go to an elite undergrad. I went to a state school, and I went there because it was close to home and affordable and so forth. And but I said, well, let me just do the best I can and hope to get into medical school. Okay. And I initially went in as a biology major. Okay. And then I quickly discovered after the first biology course that I actually hated biology.
Really?
Yes.
That's surprising.
And I thought, well, I can't do this. This is ridiculous. So I switched my major to chemistry.
Okay.
And I took the required biology courses just so I can apply to medical school, but I really had no interest in it at all. But I did eventually graduate with a degree in chemistry from Cal Poly Pomona.
And so you're much more a chemistry guy than a bio guy?
Yes.
Wow, interesting.
Yes, definitely.
Interesting. I would have never guessed that. Yeah. But wait, so I want to, since you were a boy, you knew you wanted to be a doctor? Like since you were a kid?
I would say since I was in high school. Yeah.
Okay. So was there a moment, or was there like did you witness something, or did you read a story, or was a member of your family was in medicine?
When I look at actually my family they're not in medicine. Most of them are accountants and business type people. Yeah. My father he's a retired. He was a professor of accounting. He was at Cal State LA for many years. My mother was a teacher, so my family, a lot of them are in academics and accounting in that area. But when I was growing up, there was a lot of, I at least was able to see a lot of illness in our family. And so I had a lot of interaction with medicine and the medical field in that regard.
I see.
Grandparents, aunts, uncles, and kind of developed a fascination for the whole field and seeing what I felt at the time were very good physicians interacting with my family members who were ill, and that kind of was the spark that got me thinking about medicine.
Yes, that's what I was going for. Good for you. Yeah. And so you saw them. So number one, that's surprising to me that none of your family was in medicine. It's truly only you then.
Yes, I have a cousin who he passed away a few years back, but he was a cardiologist. But that's about it.
Yeah, but he had nothing to do with the inspiration for you to become a doctor. Wow,
not really.
Good for you. You rebel. Good for you. So, so you had obviously positive experiences with seeing that, and then as you went out, and who was it? Those same? Did you consult with them as far as like, hey, I want to be like you? Like, what does it take? Or was it just, did you hear that it was a daunting task from other people?
No, I actually didn't consult with them. I mean, I was when I was exposed to them, I was still undecided. I was younger. I didn't really. They were not friends of the family, so it wasn't that I had really access to them as much. It was really other people who were telling me that this was a daunting task.
Of course,
including at the time my pre-med advisor.
Wow.
At Cal Poly Pomona. I remember when I was a freshman, I walked into his office and I said, I'm not going to name his name,
No, of
but
course
I walked into his office and I said, I'm one of the freshmen and I just started and I'm planning on going to medical school. I want to apply to medical school.
Yes.
And he looked at me and said, "Where do you want to go?" And I said, "Well, I'd like to go to a UC. I'm from California. I want to stay in California."
Yeah.
And he looked at me and he said, "Do you know the last time someone from Cal Poly Pomona got into a UC medical school was?"
Man.
I said, "No, I don't remember." He said, "It was 20 years ago.
Man.
So you should look for something else."
Really?
And
what was your reaction?
And I kind of looked at him and I said, "Well, if it's been 20 years, then I guess it's due.
Good
Someone
job.
needs to get in."
Good job. Good job. Yes.
And I just persisted. I knew he was telling me the truth about the statistic, but I didn't. Cal Poly Pomona it's a wonderful institution, and but it's an engineering and science institution.
I see.
So the vast majority of students there are there not to go to medical school.
Yes.
So the fact that they haven't had anyone go in 20 years was not that unusual or surprising, because the truth of the matter is there aren't that many pre-med students at Cal Poly Pomona. So I felt that actually that might help me, that I would, if I did well, I would stand out as a pre-med student from Cal Poly Pomona, which is a very good science institution.
Yes.
And I think that did help me.
Okay.
So I persisted and I got in on my first try.
Good for you. Good for you. Because I know there's certain people, if they want a thing and if they are told that the thing is hard, some of them will be excited by the challenge and they'll want to overcome the challenge, and some of them will actually turn away and they'll be discouraged. So obviously you're of that school. I'm from that school as well. Like, hey, you know what, this is probably not a good idea. You shouldn't do it. And it's one thing if you don't want this thing, but if you actually want it and you're told that, I can't help but to think that, especially anyone who's successful in general has had to confront those types of opinions,
Especially when you're young.
Oh, of course.
I mean, when you're young and someone tells you not to do something, you generally want to do it.
Exactly, yes. Just to stick it to them. Like, it almost makes it just...
But I must say also that the encouragement of my family was important.
Okay.
My parents never, ever told me, "Oh, you can't do this," or "You won't be able to do this," or on the contrary, they always set the framework that if you have a passion for something and if you work hard, you can do it.
Awesome.
And that was kind of a somewhat unspoken but understood principle in our home.
Okay.
And I to me that means a lot and has meant a lot and throughout my life. It's really been a drive for me to continue on.
Awesome.
So
I have to
thank my
assume
parents.
that by when you say unspoken, it's not something that was explicitly said, but implicitly demonstrated?
Yes.
Yeah. So
absolutely.
Yes, because it sounds like both your parents sounded very professional and very hardworking, but also they were really into what they were doing.
I mean, my father, I think, is really an example of an American success story. I mean, he came from Syria, did not speak English.
Wow.
His second language education in Syria was French.
Oh. So he speaks 3 languages.
Because at the time he grew up, it was the French mandate.
Okay.
And so he was not well versed in English. He had very few resources, very little money. No family here, no relatives. He didn't even know anybody here, and yet pursued the American dream. He studied hard. He did well. He worked to support himself, and eventually got a PhD and a CPA.
Awesome.
And worked in the field of accounting, and then went back to academia and was a very successful academic and author.
I love that story. I love stories like that.
And so just his life was inspiring to me.
I see.
And I always thought, well, if he could do what he did, here I am. I have all the support, all the, I speak the language, everything's good.
No
I should be able to do it.
Yeah. There's no excuse. We have nothing to complain about. Do you feel, now it might be different, but back then, did you feel pressure from him to be like that? Or was there ever any, you should seek to be successful when you grow up, or it was still that implicit, unspoken, hey, if you're into something, chase it headlong and work hard?
My dad never said a word about that. I mean, never.
Yeah.
I mean, he never said do this or do that, or don't do this or don't do that. He would ask, "What do you want to do? What are you planning?" But never really it really didn't matter what I said. I could have said I wanted to, go into dancing, and he probably said, "Okay, fine, I'll just do a good job." He really never said yes or no.
Yeah.
My mom, is a wonderful person, and she was concerned more about the time and the effort that has to be put in to become a physician.
Okay.
And so she always thought, "Are you sure you want to do this?" I mean, it was almost like she was somewhat discouraging me because of the intensity of study.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I could tell that she had a lot of pride that I was actually pursuing a good career.
Yes.
Those things, but never truly spoken. No.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So you were told that this is all pre-med school, and you were told that it was daunting, and I'm sure you knew it too. I'm sure you knew that it was going to be a large sacrifice for a large number of years. And so, like, I went to nursing school, right? And during the orientation, we were told in this large auditorium that this is study and rigor on the level of medicine, and to the extent that socially, if you are married, tell your spouse you'll be dead for about 2 years. If you are in a relationship, you should break up. And if you're single, don't you even dare think about like dating anybody serious or anything like that. And it was 100% true. Like, I watched as marriages fell apart. I watched as relationships fell apart. I watched people cheat, and stuff like that. And it was bad. Like, all the girls gained 15 pounds. All the guys lost 15 pounds just from the stress. And, it's almost 12, 15 hours of your day committed to this one thing and you've sacrificed a lot for a long time. Is it true?
It is true.
Okay.
I remember the first day of medical school.
Yeah.
The dean, wonderful person, walked in, stood in front of the class of 120 students, and we were all. It was orientation, so we hadn't started classes yet. They had 3-4 days of orientation, and then they would start the real classes.
Yeah.
And this was at UC San Diego, which if anyone listening has never been there, it's right on the ocean. It's a beautiful campus.
Oh no!
The weather is fantastic.
Yeah.
It's a great place.
Yeah.
It's more like they really should build a resort there.
Yes,
I mean, it's just a beautiful place.
Wow.
And literally, you could cross the street and be on the beach.
Wow.
And she walked in, first day of orientation, and she said, "Good morning, welcome to UC San Diego Medical School. We're in beautiful sunny San Diego. The beach is right across the street. I would advise you to go there today because after today, you'll never see it again."
Wow.
And she was right.
She was right. Wow.
And she was right.
Wow. Did a bunch of you take her advice? Did you in fact go?
So we did. In fact, they actually had a barbecue that afternoon.
Yes.
For the whole class.
Awesome.
On the beach.
Just to give you something.
And that was our last visit to the beach.
Wow. I can't even imagine that. Like that, I can't even imagine that.
Yep.
So that means share a typical day of med school. Like I'm sure every day was different in its own way, but there had to be some kind of structure or some kind of like, it was 8 hours of this, and then like a 1 hour to eat, and then 2 more hours of this. So are you able to share like the structure of a typical day?
Medical school was divided into two main parts.
Okay.
The first part are the first 2 years of medical school, which is mainly classroom lectures, tests, kind of the academic learning part, book learning part.
Yeah.
And the second part of medical school are the last 2 years, which are mainly spent in the hospital.
Okay.
So that's actually
That
seeing patients, taking care of patients. And the first 2 years were fairly regimented. You didn't get to choose your schedule or anything like that. They defined the schedule. Classes usually started at 8 a.m.
Yeah.
Sometimes 7 a.m., depending on if it was a laboratory, it would start early. And they would go on till about 4:35 p.m.
Oh, wow.
And of course, there was a lunch break and several other little breaks in between, but it was back-to-back classes, labs, so forth.
Yeah.
And then the next day it would repeat itself. They would have 1/2 day a week where you actually went to the hospital and interviewed patients and got to kind of get your feet wet with real medicine. The problem is when you went home at 5 o'clock, you had several hundred pages to read.
That is insane.
In preparation for the following day.
That is insane.
And I remember the first week of medical school, our biochemistry professor at that time, great professor, but very casually walked in on the first day and said, the first day was a Monday, and he said, well, Wednesday we're going to have a quiz. It's a short quiz. It's only 15 minutes of the class. The class was an hour and a half.
Yeah.
We're going to have 15 minutes of a quiz, and it's going to cover chapters 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, and 9.
Jesus.
So make sure you read them.
Yes.
And, of course, each chapter was like 30, 40 pages.
Yeah.
But he just very casually said,
yeah.
let's just cover all that.
Yeah.
And the problem was that we all looked at each other as students and thought, oh, my God, we only have 2 nights to do this because we had classes till 5.
Yeah.
I mean, and the question was, did anyone dare to raise their hand and say, are we covering the entire chapters, or are there certain?
Right.
But nobody dared ask the question. Nobody wanted to look bad.
Yes.
And so we just sucked it up, and we went and read all night.
That is insane.
And we used to, a friend of mine and I used to go study at Denny's.
Yes.
Because Denny's was open 24 hours, and it was close to the med school.
Yes.
So we would go there, and they had free coffee refills. So
oh, my God. Heaven. Yeah, heaven for medicine.
We would sit there and drink coffee and quiz each other and read and stay till 1, 2 in the morning and then try to get some sleep before the next day.
Do you remember the test? Like, did it in fact cover all those chapters?
Yes, it did. Oh yeah, no, there's no joking.
There's no joking.
Yeah. It was real.
Yes.
It was real.
Okay, so wait. So before you even get into med school, I imagine there was like prerequisites. There's like other classes that you have to prove yourself before you get to med school. So did all those previous classes, like what class was that for? That quiz.
That was for a biochemistry class.
Okay, so did your previous experience with biology and chemistry even help with that quiz, or was it?
So I was a chemistry major,
right.
So I actually took a lot of biochemistry courses before getting to medical school. But the problem is they did help in terms of my understanding of the very basics.
Yes.
The complexity in medical school is not so much the science itself, but how you apply the science to medical situations, to real life.
Yes.
That you don't learn in undergrad. And that's the difficult part, because that really requires. They assume you know the information.
Yes.
Gotcha. The learning is how do you apply the information.
Yes, that makes sense. Okay. Yeah, and that seems like it's also an unspoken implicit things. Like you've made it here, so you're supposed to know your stuff.
Correct.
And you're here to learn other things that you don't necessarily know unless you've spent years in a hospital and your family is whatever. So,
correct.
And so that was your rude awakening to essentially, what is it, like 4 years, 6 years?
4 years of medical school. So 2 years. The second 2-year portion, which is the second part, is spent in the hospital.
Okay.
And that is very busy. Things have changed a little bit now. They have different regulations, but at the time, students would come in at 6 or 7 in the morning. They would be assigned a certain number of patients.
Yeah.
They rotate through different specialties, so internal medicine, surgery, OBGYN, psychiatry, so forth. They would round on the patients and prepare a report to the resident, who was already a physician in training, but much higher in seniority. And they would have to report their findings. Yeah. And then they would round with the attending, who was the professor. And that was where real learning occurred. Okay. It was embarrassing and it was tough. Yep. But it was real learning, because the way it works is the professor asks the student questions.
Yes. In front of everybody.
In front of everybody. Yep. And if you don't know the answer, you're embarrassed. You're weak. You'll probably never get a letter of recommendation from that professor, and it can be quite embarrassing. And every physician will, whether they're willing to admit it or not, have been embarrassed at their time. Yes. And
it's their duty to pass it on. It's their duty to,
absolutely. Yeah. And but it was. I mean, and it varied. Some professors were very nice and very benign. Others were not. Yes. Others were really tough, but they meant well. They really wanted us to learn. Yes. And to become responsible and independently responsible. Yes. To be able to really make decisions. And at the time when you're a student, you hate it because you don't want to be embarrassed. Of course. But in retrospect, you realize that they really actually were helping. Yes. Helping me learn how to take care of patients. Yes. And a lot of those moments of embarrassment,
Yeah.
you never forget.
Of course.
The learning
Yes.
that you acquire at
Yes.
that moment
Yep.
stays with you
Yep,
forever
that's like
because it's so
lifelong.
powerful.
Yes. Yes.
And I had great professors, and I appreciate everything they've done for me. They really they made sure we learned medicine. They were absolutely, that was their mission, and you could tell that they
Yes.
were committed to that.
Awesome.
And did it correctly.
Awesome.
But it was tough.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. And then you had to take call, which was the worst part,
What is
because call is actually sleeping in the hospital.
Wow.
So the way they had it in many of the specialties is every third night you would have to sleep in the hospital.
Wait, so they actually have rooms? Like
They do. They have rooms, but you really don't see the room because you're working throughout the night.
Jeez.
So patients come in through the emergency room.
Right.
Typically, this more senior person would send the student to
That
begin
makes sense.
gathering information,
That is crazy.
writing reports,
Yeah.
getting everything
Yeah.
prepared for the morning. You might be lucky if you catch an hour or two of sleep.
That is insane.
And then you have to work the following day
Yeah.
all day till
Wow.
5, 6 p.m., whatever it takes.
Wow.
So that was a big change
Yeah.
because most people don't do that in their
course,
life.
of course.
And this was the first time that we actually had to take call and
Yes.
sleep outside of our bed, outside of our home,
Yep.
and work,
Yes.
through the night and the
Yes.
next day. And it takes some adjusting and
Yep.
some time to kind of get used to that paradigm.
Yeah.
But it happens pretty quickly. After a few weeks, it becomes second nature. You just do
Yes.
it. And
That's insane. I had no idea because like that right there, the call that call situation lied outside of my preconceived notions of med school. It's like, of course it's going to be rough. Of course it's going to be 10, 12 hours of studying and mental challenge and psychological challenge, and you're dealing with like a crappy lifestyle for the sake of just getting this thing done. But to essentially violate the basics of sleeping and boarding it makes sense to me now, like as I hear it,
Yeah.
But for a school to actually implement that kind of practice, I think is fantastic. I think it's great.
And that's pretty standard. I mean, I think what it does, which I didn't appreciate at the time,
Of course.
but later, it trains you to think properly and quickly, even if you're physically tired.
Yes, under duress, yes.
Which most people cannot do.
Of course.
But you can be trained to.
It can be trained to, yeah.
And it came in handy later in life,
Yeah,
even
I can
till this day.
Yeah.
I mean, if I get a call in the middle of the night about a patient,
Yeah.
the training clicks on.
Yes.
I can understand
Yes.
what they're calling me about very quickly and process it and make, most of the time, the right decision
Wow.
on how to handle it.
Yes.
And that takes training. That's
course.
nobody's born with that.
Right.
And so they make sure that you train to be able to do that.
Yes.
And I never realized it at the time,
Yeah,
but now I appreciate it.
Yeah, that is fascinating. Like, because it almost sounds as if you can attribute that one key ingredient of making life-death decisions under duress and under fatigue through this one mode of training within med school that essentially forced you to be that good, or to force you to understand like this is what it's going to take in the real world.
Yeah.
And without that mode of training, you would be very ill prepared for it to happen in the real world.
That's correct. And this goes on, of course, through residency training. So
Okay.
specialty training, it becomes even more intense
Yes.
because as a student, you're supervised. So anything, you don't really make life and death decisions.
Sure.
There's someone, a
Yes,
senior
of course, yeah.
physician who is overlooking your every move and
Yes.
make sure you do the right thing, and teaching and counseling. But then as you ascend in the ranks,
Yes.
you become the responsible
Yes,
party.
yes.
And that there's an evolution there that has to happen.
Right.
And it takes time
Yeah.
and training and effort and seeing cases and that, but it's good training. It's a traditional training. It's been like this in American medicine for at least a century.
Wow.
That people have been trained this way, and it works.
Yeah, yeah.
So the model works, so
Yeah.
people keep doing it.
It's funny because so much of what you're describing reminds me more of my militaristic style training as a teenager in this program versus my actual like nursing, because in that type of training you're under constant duress and psychological stress. You're being challenged, and like they are in violation of your sleep and boarding for most of the time, and but the lessons were extremely hard and almost traumatizing and embarrassing, but you will remember them forever. And it's not coming from a place of malice. It's coming from a place of like, look, we're tough on you because what this is going to translate in the real world is even tougher. And we can't essentially ethically or legally simulate those conditions, but we can come as close as possible to it. And you hate it at the time, right? Because at the time you're just like,
Yes.
this is BS. Like, I can't believe this. But then when the real deal goes down, you're like, oh, thank God that happened. Yeah. And then when you're like a little know nothing and you're just embarrassed and scared and just like panicking all the time. And then when you actually, I was told once, like, you have no idea how much we love you and how much we envy you. Like, all you have to do is do what you're told. But we actually have to make decisions that can affect the outcome of so many things. Like, when you're in our position, you need to be able to be that good. And so when like you said, when you ascend, not only is your competence increased, but also your responsibility. And so when now it's you are in charge of turning this noob into a competent person, you're like, oh crap, like this is so much harder.
Right.
It's like, I wish I could just go back to being a new guy, So
And you suddenly feel this sense of responsibility that if I don't train, this next person right,
that's on me.
How are they going to take care of patients?
Right,
People are going to be at risk because they're not going to know what to do.
Yes.
And so you then put your 100% effort into that and embarrass them.
Yes, exactly.
Just
like I'm not embarrassing you because I want to. It's because I have to. Yeah.
So,
can you talk about residency? Because
Sure.
So residency occurs after, just to be clear, residency occurs after medical school, so after those 4 years?
Correct. So what happens is that in the last year of medical school, people have to choose a specialty to go into. And they apply for a residency. As the name implies, you are a resident in the hospital, also, so you're there all the time.
Yeah.
And you take call. Often it's every third or fourth evening that you have to sleep in the hospital and take care of patients. And sometimes more if necessary.
Yeah.
But you apply. In the United States, there's a matching system, so you apply to various places. The different programs also rank their candidates, who they want to take, and a computer matches them and tries to, based on your preference and the program's preference.
That is fascinating.
And so you only get one spot at the end.
Yes, of course. Wow.
So
slim pickings.
You choose, you rank how many programs ever you want to rank, and you put them in a first preference, second, third, and they also rank the candidates.
Of course.
This person first, and then a computer matches them.
Yes.
And so there's a lot of uncertainty, and match day is usually in March, and it's a big deal.
Yeah.
I don't know how they do it now. It must be computerized, but at the time you got an envelope.
Yes.
And it was sort of a tradition. Everyone was in the office.
That must be nerve-wracking.
Yes, and everyone opens their envelope and finds out where they matched, and it's quite an emotional moment.
I can't imagine.
But at that time, I matched at UC San Diego, so I wanted to stay there.
Okay.
And I ranked them number one, and I guess they ranked me high too. And so I ended up staying there for residency. I did internal medicine, which is a 3-year residency.
Wow.
The first year of residency is actually called internship.
Okay.
And it's residency is a little bit different than being a student, because now you actually are an MD. You actually have a license.
Yep.
You can actually write a prescription.
Yep.
You can order tests. You can do all kinds of crazy things.
Yes.
And that transition from when you're a student, you can order things, but no one can execute the order until the physician signs it.
Of course.
Now you're a physician, someone will execute your order.
Yes.
And so that mindset is a very scary one.
Yes.
Even though there's been training, there's been this, there's been that, you really don't know much.
Right.
And here you are administering medications, ordering tests, doing things that affect people's lives.
Right.
And you have a lot of doubt.
Yes.
Am I doing the right thing? Is this going to cause a problem? Is the patient going to get a side effect? And you become very, very nervous about that.
Yeah.
It's a humbling experience. You quickly realize how much you don't know.
Yes.
And I've been to 4 years undergrad, 4 years med school, and I still don't know anything.
Don't know. Yeah.
And it's but it also motivates you to want to learn and to be better.
Yes.
But that is a very stressful period in any physician's training.
I can imagine.
When they're in residency. And It's, of course, the second year of residency is easier than the first.
Yes.
The third is easier than the second.
Yes.
And you spend most of it in the hospital, but some of it's also out of the hospital. So going to clinics, seeing patients in the real world, if you will. And so you get a varied experience and different specialties as well. So within internal medicine, for example, you would do cardiology and pulmonology and nephrology and kind of rotate through different specialties to learn more in depth about each one.
Yes.
Residency training is tough, but it's really for any physician, it's the period of true growth.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, that's where you really grow into becoming a full-fledged physician.
Yeah.
And taking the responsibility. And they're tough. Residencies are not easy. Professors are tough. The patients can be very challenging. It's often busy.
Yep.
Most residencies occur in very big hospitals with very busy emergency rooms, usually inner city, but it can be also not inner city. But it's quite challenging. I mean, you see some very difficult cases.
Yeah.
And you learn from that, and it's a very satisfying thing.
What would you describe? Okay, so you just described the typical day or the typical week of a student. How is the typical day or the typical week of a resident different from the typical week of a student?
Usually starts earlier. So the resident is usually in the hospital by 6 a.m.
Okay.
And what they typically do is check their patient's data, labs, vital signs. They go visit the patient, examine them.
Yep.
They prepare a list of the problems that the patient has that day and their suggested actions.
Yes.
Now, they're not in a position to execute those plans. They have to first discuss it with the professor.
Yes.
And so typically this coming in at 6 a.m. is a preparation for rounding with the professor.
And that occurs when, like 8?
Usually around 8 o'clock, 7, 8. And they basically go as a team. They walk around from room to room and see each patient.
Okay.
And the professor asks the student embarrassing questions, but then really solidifies the plan with the resident.
Yes.
The resident is supposed to really step up to the plate and correct any errors the student's making and the intern is making, and trying to really crystallize the plan for the patient on how to treat them. And that's where a lot of in-depth learning occurs.
Yes.
The professor will impart their knowledge and experience and to the resident and really by discussing whatever case. It's a lot more benign. The relationship between resident and professor is a cordial one.
Yes.
And it's really it's where very high level learning occurs.
Okay.
And
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because if anyone's spent any time in the hospital, they'll see that. They'll see there's obviously a master guy, and then there's obviously a scared new guy, and they're walking side by side a lot.
Yes.
And the master guy is trying to prevent the scared new guy from having a full out panic attack.
Yes.
And the new guy is trying their very best to not panic and make the right decisions.
Right.
So that's where that comes from. That is residency.
that is residency.
Okay.
Yes.
That's so cool.
Yes.
So so it starts at 6, and you're pretty much spending 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. worrying your butt off, trying to not embarrass yourself and studying everything and knowing the answers to all these questions. And then from 8 a.m. until end of day, you're essentially rounding and practicing what you're going to do in the real world.
Well, it's quite complicated. Okay. So from 8 a.m. till probably noon, you're actually rounding with the professor. Now, during that time frame, you're getting phone calls about new patients that are coming in.
Okay.
So you spend most of your afternoon and into the evening, whatever time it takes, admitting those new patients, getting a plan going, writing notes.
It just sounds like chaos.
And it just keeps going.
Yes.
And then problems occur. Patients crash, their blood pressure drops, they can't breathe. You have to go and take care of them. And the day goes by very quickly when you're a resident. And it typically lasts. When you're on call, you stay all night.
Yes.
When you're not on call, you could be there till 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night easily.
Yes.
And you go home, you got to come back the next morning early. So it was. I was single when I was a resident, so it was easy. But for people who were married or had a significant other, it was very difficult for them, especially if their partner was not in medicine.
Yes, they don't understand.
Because people who are not in medicine or in healthcare in general don't really have a true understanding of what's involved.
Yes.
And it's easy to tell someone what's involved, but it's a lot different when they've experienced it and they know it.
Very much.
So I saw many of my colleagues at the time who had difficulty in their relationships.
Yes.
It wasn't easy for them.
Yeah.
Because it is challenging, and it's tough for the spouse, partner, significant other. It's tough for them to live through that.
Yeah.
Because time is precious, and there isn't much time.
There isn't much time. Yeah. That's true.
And that's sad.
Yeah. I mean, because I'm not gonna sit here and say that nursing school is the same as medical school. I know they're absolutely not. But I remember there's a buddy of mine. I'm not gonna mention his name. But, you enter into this thing with a significant other, with a girlfriend, and he had been with her for a long time. But I remember smack in the middle of nursing school, like after a year, so we're like halfway in. He was just like, I don't know if we're gonna make it, because she's like getting upset, and I'm it's very, because even though he loved her, he has to prioritize getting this thing done. But I will say, like, now they're still together, and they toughed it out, and that was one out of,
that's great.
Yeah, that was one out of like five or six that didn't make it. And so so after the 3 years of residency, are you on your own? Like, do they just kick you to the curb and you're like, okay?
Yes, no, they don't kick you to the curb.
Yeah.
They actually really try to help you solidify your career.
Good.
After all is said and done, and after all those years, the professors really want to make sure that every resident gets a job, gets secure, or realizes their dream, whatever it may be. Now, many residents will go into a specialty. So after the residency, then they do something called a fellowship, which is 2 or 3 more years of very in-depth, intense training on one field, which is what I did. I went into nephrology.
Yes.
Some people go out and just work as physicians. Some people decide they don't like taking care of patients, and they go and do research, or they work for a big company like Amgen or whatever and become scientists. The beauty of an MD degree and of medical training is it offers you a lot of career choices and flexibility.
Yes.
But most people end up getting a job.
Yes.
And it's I actually, when I finished my residency, I did an additional year as a chief resident.
Really? I didn't even know such a thing existed.
There's a chief resident, which is a resident who stays on for 1 more year in internal medicine, and they basically manage all of the residents.
Oh, that's cool.
Their schedules, their problems, their issues. Does a lot of teaching, so it's sort of a academic role as well.
Yes.
And then after that, I worked for a year as an internist.
Yes.
And that was a very satisfying year. I absolutely loved it. And then after that, I went into nephrology.
Gotcha. Wait, so chief resident, internist, nephrologist. So what is an internist?
An internist is sort of a primary care physician, so somebody who takes care of patients. They're kind of, a lot of people say, I have a doctor.
Yes.
That's really what they are. So
Gotcha.
Any problem you have, you go to the internist.
Gotcha.
And they will either take care of it, or if they feel you need specialty care, they'll refer the patient to the specialist.
Okay.
It's actually very tough being an internist, because you have to really know a lot about everything.
Yes.
And that's not very easy to keep everything straight.
No. It's hard enough to know a lot about one thing.
About one thing, correct. So, but they do a good job, and they work hard. And if they don't know, they refer, and that's appropriate. I did it for a year. I loved it.
Yep.
I absolutely loved it. The nice thing about it is you establish a good relationship with the patients.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like.
You're their doctor,
You're there,
so they know you and you know them.
Yeah.
But I needed something more.
Yeah.
I wanted to be a specialist,
Yes.
and there are a lot of people in my life at that time who steered me in that direction, and who encouraged me, and who were mentors, and I feel indebted to them because I'm doing what I truly love,
Yes.
and they made me realize that.
Okay.
Sometimes you don't know what your passion is.
Right.
And it takes sometimes someone to help you see it.
Yes.
And there are a lot of good people in my life in San Diego who,
Yes.
at the time, made me see that.
Good, yeah, because I feel like this is the perfect segue into the next question because, so from internists to nephrology, so we're gonna get personal now.
Sure.
Right? I graduated school 2009, December 2009. Yeah, so December 2009. I'm at a crossroads personally because if you've been listening to my podcast at all, you know that I feel like nursing is the epitome of the American dream for the Filipino culture because this is just my hypothesis that I essentially can't prove, but very very nice race, very humble, very hospitable, but also very risk averse, not very pioneering in the sense that they tend to push towards nursing not because they care about the nursing field, but because nursing is essentially safe. It's like safer. The money is good. You don't take on the responsibility of a doctor. These are all unspoken things that I had to kind of parse like together. It's like why not encourage being a doctor versus being a nurse? So essentially, I was pushed towards that in that direction for a long time, and what I wanted, which was the military, didn't happen. And when I was presented with the second chance after the transplant and everything, I wasn't sure. Like the one thing I wanted, I could never have, and so I didn't know any of the other options out there. So went to nursing school. It was a crazy time, very very crazy, and learned a lot. I still keep in touch with some of the friends that I made from there. I feel kind of bad because it's not that I was like living a lie, but I kind of was, so I don't know how I made it. I don't know. I feel like the teachers and the students saw things in me that maybe I didn't see, but either way, it happened. And after I graduated nursing school, halfway through nursing school, I found CrossFit. And so philosophically, I was aligned with everything that was going on there. And even physically, my life has always been tied to a physical practice. And maybe that physical practice was always a spiritual practice for me, but I agreed with everything, and it made sense to me. Everything felt right when I was doing it. And by the way, I'm not like trashing on nursing. This is a very personal thing, but I felt so torn during my last half of nursing school because I'd come home and the internet was still kind of new back then, but I'd have these huge stacks of nursing books that I would have to study, and then there's the training journals that I was so obsessed with. And so I always had to make a choice, and I would always choose the training stuff over the nursing stuff. And so, just shocker, I wasn't a great nursing student. So basically, when I graduated, they voted me to read the oath. They voted me as like all these things, which was a huge honor. But still, when I graduated, I was also a nurse's aide in a hospital, so I had IDs. Like at that time, nursing jobs were not what they were like maybe even a decade earlier. So I had opportunity and I had offers and everything, but I was so torn because I also had opportunities and offers in the training world. And so with one, the money is good, the mobility is good, the opportunity for travel is good, the security is there, the insurance is there, like all these things that made sense. But then with the training world, we had no idea how we were going to make money. I had no idea how I was going to get insurance because I'm a transplant, recipient. That's kind of important. And and it was basically building it from nothing. So I had to choose between essentially safety and safety and security. And we're going to take a quick break. I'm going to come back. Go for it. And we're back. And so I had a choice between safety and security of nursing versus the risk of fitness training, but I knew my passion was 100% there. I found something that was 100% aligned with my essential philosophy, not just philosophy on life, but my practice on life. And I was really torn because I was, you grow up in a situation where you're essentially you're being groomed to go in a certain direction, a direction that you don't necessarily agree with, versus other philosophies that you want to go with. And I think I had just reread The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand, and I had just reread like all these other books that are just, it's very much I feel like it's a Western civilization thought of leaving safety and security for the chance to do something great, even though taking that chance could harm you greatly. I think that's a distinctly American, mode of thinking, and I am not afraid to admit that that's also my default mode of thinking. I'm I don't like being constrained, and I don't like, even if those constraints are from my own self, like I want to go out and do stuff and explore the great unknown and see what we can make out of it. And so I consulted with you about this. I don't know if you remember. This was 2009, right? It's so long ago. But I told you the situation that I was in, and I remember certain things that you said. You said you were listening to my story, and you were just listening and listening, and I was really torn up about it. And you said, my advice, do what you love. And and I think the next thing you said was, it's very difficult to be successful at something that you don't enjoy doing. And I was like, okay, that makes sense. Because I remember during, it wasn't called residency in nursing. It was just clinicals. So like during clinicals in nursing, you had to go to all these different hospitals and all these different things. And I liked none of them. I remember going to the hospitals, and I'm thinking it's like very sterile and it's very quiet and it looks like a horror movie. And I'm just like, man, I can't like, is this it? Like, is this the next 60 years of my life? Just like doing this. And so, but every time I'm at the gym or every time I help somebody like learn how to squat or learn how to do a pull-up, it's like the greatest thing in the world to me. So I remember coming to you and thinking, hey, I need help. I don't know what to do. And then you said do what you love, and it's very difficult to be successful at something that you don't enjoy doing. And then you told me your story on how, here's how I remember it. You had just finished medical school and residency. You were being courted essentially by some large, I was about to say firm, like some large hospital, and they took you on this crazy cruise thing, and I think you had a girlfriend or your fiance at the time was super excited. Your family was really excited. And then I think at the 11th hour you pulled out and you're like, I don't want to do this. I love nephrology and I want to do that. So do you remember, first of all, do you remember that story? Like, do I have it kind of right? Or did I remember things in a completely warped way?
No, you have the basics right.
Okay.
But before that, I want to get personal with you a little bit.
Yeah.
I remember when I first met Zeb, he told you his memory of me when we first met. Yeah. My memory of him. I remember I got a phone call from the emergency room at Providence, and they said, we have a young patient here with kidney failure.
Yeah.
And he's not doing well. He can't breathe. He's in deep trouble.
Yeah.
And I came to see him, and he didn't look anything like any of my kidney patients. I mean, most of my kidney patients are older.
Yeah.
They tend to be very sick. You can tell that they've been sick for a while.
Yeah.
Zeb looked healthy.
Yeah.
He looked like an athlete. I mean, he was good. And when you see that, it as a physician, it hurts because you think, wow, here's a young, healthy man who just has been stricken with a horrible disease. Mm-hmm. And I remember when we talked about dialysis that first day,
yeah.
you told me that you wanted to go to the military,
yeah.
that you wanted to be a Marine.
Huh.
And I remember that.
Yeah.
And I knew in my heart that you would never be able to do that.
Yes.
And that made me feel really bad. I actually felt sad that I didn't tell you at the time. I couldn't. I was more focused on, let's try to get you through the next 24 hours safely.
Yeah.
But it was, and I was in San Diego, which is a big military town.
Yeah.
And in fact, part of my training in nephrology was 3 months at the Balboa Naval Hospital.
Wait a minute. So you drove to Providence in North Hills from San Diego?
No. This was before I came to Providence.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, when I was in San Diego before I moved. I had just moved from San Diego, actually,
Crazy.
when I met you. I think I'd been up in the valley for maybe a month or so or less.
Yeah.
But before that, I was in San Diego. And part of my training was at the Balboa Naval Hospital.
Huh.
So I took care of a lot of Marines.
Yeah.
And I knew their passion for what they did.
Yeah.
And so when you told me that you wanted to
Yeah.
be in the military, it broke my heart
Yeah.
that I knew you wouldn't be able to. And
Thank you for not telling me.
I did not tell you
Yeah.
because there's nothing worse than telling someone you can't pursue your passion.
Yes.
You just won't be able to.
Yeah.
That hurts.
Yeah.
And but I also admire your perseverance
Yeah.
over the years, and how you were able to find another passion.
Yes.
And that's not easy, but and not many people don't do that, and they fail at it miserably. Yeah. But you really did. And so I do remember when you came in 2009, and it was just a routine visit.
Yeah.
And I don't know what led us into the subject matter. I think I'd asked you about nursing and how things were going,
Yeah.
and you kind of told me how you really felt.
Yes.
And I remember some of the concerns you expressed, how it would affect your family and your friends and your classmates in nursing school, and how you would you really be letting everyone down, and so forth and so on. And so I shared with you my story, and when I was in residency and in medical school and in nephrology, I did a lot of research. Mm-hmm. So in addition to taking care of patients, I was doing research, and I was doing pretty good at it. I didn't particularly like it.
Yes.
But at that time, I was married, so it wasn't. She wasn't my fiance. It was my wife at the time.
Okay.
And I was being pulled in a lot of different directions.
Yeah.
The university at the time wanted me to stay on as a faculty member to do more research, and in fact, I even. When you tell me you went to the hospital and you thought, am I going to be doing this for the next 60 years?
Right.
I had to write a grant to try to get money to do research.
Yeah. And
I remember at midnight, I'm sitting there typing this thing, and I'm on page 30 of 50 of the grant, and I had the exact same thought.
Yes.
Am I really going to have to do this for the next 60 years?
Right.
I absolutely hated it.
Yeah.
And they were encouraging me, oh, you're good at it, you're this, you're that. Another big company at the time wanted me to join them. Mm-hmm. It's a big pharmaceutical company. I won't name its name.
Yep.
But they wanted me to join them as a research scientist.
Wow.
And they were in the field of nephrology.
Yeah.
And they sent people out. They took me to dinners. Yeah. They were heavily recruiting me.
Yeah.
And they were going to pay me a lot of money.
Yeah.
It was going to be a tremendous amount of money. Mm-hmm. A lot more than I'm making now, even.
Yes.
I mean, it's just big money with big potential, with ownership potential, stock options, this, that.
Wow.
If I did good, of course. Very lucrative. And family was giving me different feedback. But all I really wanted to do, my passion, was to take care of patients.
Yes.
That was my passion.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, I would be perfectly content and happy in my life if I spent every day going to the hospital, taking care of patients, coming to my office and seeing patients and taking care of them, and taking care of dialysis patients.
Yeah.
That was my passion. And yes, the money wasn't going to be as good as if I went with the company. The prestige would not have been as good as if I stayed with the university and become a professor and a writer and published articles and did the research that's going to change how we treat patients for the next 100 years.
Yeah.
Fame and money can be very alluring.
Yes.
And can really play with your mind
Yes.
and try to pull you in different directions. One day I just said, you know what, I'm going to do what I like. I don't want any of this.
Wow.
And I walked away from both.
Wow.
I remember telling the chair of the department that I'm going to go into private practice.
Yes.
I'm moving on. I'm just going to. I just want to take care of patients.
Yeah.
And he was a very he has passed away since, but he was a wonderful person who I'm indebted to. He's my mentor. He taught me a lot, And he said, well, yes, we all like to take care of patients, but you will do good in research, and you'll do this, and you'll do that. And I said, no, you don't understand.
Yeah.
That's my passion.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I want to do for the next 50 years.
Right.
That's what I want to do, and I will be perfectly happy doing it for 50 years.
Yes.
And that's where I'm going to go home every day and feel like I've done something that I enjoy and I love and I feel passionate about, and I'm ready to do the next day the exact same thing.
Yes.
And I said, anything else is not going to give me that satisfaction.
Right.
The company that was trying to recruit me, they had the president call me and the company and let's take you on a cruise and let's do this and let's do that. And I said, look, I just want to have an office. I want to take care of patients. I want to go to the hospital. And they said, wait, we're offering you all this money. How could you turn down? This is the best offer we've ever made to anyone in the past 30 years. Yeah. How could you turn this down?
Right.
And I said, I'm sorry, I'm turning it down.
Yeah.
And it was the beauty of it is once you make that decision, it actually feels very easy.
Yes.
It's difficult to make the decision, but once you make the decision, you feel good. You're like, I made the right decision, that's it.
100%.
And I have no regrets. It's been 15, 16 years since that time, and I have no regrets.
Yes.
And I love what I do.
Yeah.
I get to live my passion every day.
Yeah.
And I still am.
Awesome.
And so I just simply told you what I had gone through.
Yes.
And it was the truth, and it was genuine, and I could sense in you where your passion was.
Yeah.
And the thing about it is, you're very smart. You're very hardworking. Yeah. You could be successful in anything. I mean, I think you'd be a fantastic nurse. And you'd probably move up in the rankings of nursing. To really high levels. But if your heart's not there, you would do a lot better in pursuing what your passion is about. And that goes for all of us. Yeah. If we do what we love, what we like, and then we will be successful at it. And we'll be very successful at it. Yeah. And it is a unique American ideal because it's only in America that we actually have the opportunity to pursue our passions.
Yes.
Many other countries, many other people in the world don't have that opportunity. They may have passions, but they can't pursue them. Yes. I mean, they just have obstacles. Right. Whether it be political or social or financial, whatever it may be. And they never can realize their dreams and their passions. Yes. But in the U.S., anyone can. Yes. If they put their mind to it. Right. And have the patience and perseverance to do it, they will. And that's what makes our country so great. Yeah. No, I 100%. It's such a, because I also try to keep up with current events, not so much because sometimes it just makes me upset, but I feel like that message has been a little lost lately, or it's been a little misconstrued and like just as of late, but it's still the same. It's not like a bunch of us are trying to fight to get to some other country to pursue our dreams there. It's like there's the idea of there's America, the land of resources and borders, versus America, the idea of America, where if you just simply take the Constitution and the values that built it and transplanted it to some other country, and taken the values and Constitution and government of that country and transplanted it to America, inside of 1 or 2 generations, this country would look like that country, and that country would look like America. Yes. And that's really all I wanted, and that's really all you need. It's like there's the difference between the immigrants mindset versus the homeborns kind of mindset, and so then that becomes like a debate on how like prophets receive no honor in their own home, and you see something from the outside and you prize it more, like the adopted child works harder, so things like that. But I like that can turn into its own like big thing, but I didn't know. I don't remember telling you that I wanted to join the military then. All I remember is you telling me that I needed dialysis, and all I wanted was a transplant in order to get into the military. But thinking back, that is something that I would say. Like that is 100% something I would do. Like I would just announce it to whoever, because I think at that point I was just so desperate, and so I've been waiting for so long.
as stubborn as I am, I also try to be really patient, and I know certain worthwhile goals can take years with zero feedback.
Yes.
And so I like to think that I'm well practiced there, and they don't always work, and that is the nature of risk too. But I don't know if I ever told you, when you told me that story, that actually helped me make the decision. So that helped me make the decision. And I've been a trainer now since 2010, so almost 10 years, I think, and I regret it not at all. It's been a wild ride. It has not been a linear, progressive, upward, road. I don't know that success ever is. And there's been lots of heartbreaks, and there's been lots of like triumphant Olympian level wins, and there's been some extremely heartbreaking, traumatizing, losses, but I wouldn't trade any of that for the kind of stale, steady, thing that rightfully so my parents wanted for me. That's just not what I wanted for me. I don't think that they came here for that. Or at the very least, they came here so that we could have a chance at a better life, and I want to take that chance instead of taking the old chances. Yeah. So yeah, I'll always be indebted to you for that. So why nephrology? Like, why? That's another question too, because
That's a whole nother story.
That's a whole nother story. Okay, yeah, I mean, because you told a story of how you were inspired to become a doctor, but I don't. Because if you were to ever have the pleasure of meeting Dr. Abdeen, it's very obvious that he really loves what he does, and he really cares. Like, he will go above and beyond. There's some people who have to practice to go above and beyond because they're used to doing things to standard. But going above and beyond is like, it's as easy as breathing for Dr. Abdeen. I've seen, and it's you get spoiled. Like, I get spoiled as a patient. One of my dreams is to just kind of travel the world at whim. And I know every 3 or 4 months I'm just going to come back here because I'm going to go see him. And so that's, because I have to, but also because I want to. So are you, I mean, I know it's another story, but can you tell even the basics? Like,
sure. I actually never wanted to be a nephrologist.
Huh.
When I was in medical school, up until the last month of medical school,
yeah.
I wanted to be a pediatrician.
Interesting. I can see that.
And
I can see that.
That was what I wanted to. In fact, I did so many different. In that last year of medical school, I did quite a few pediatric rotations, and
wow.
and I was going to apply to a pediatric residency.
Interesting.
And
I never knew this.
The last few weeks, before we had to apply for residency, I changed my mind.
Wow.
And sometimes one incident happens in your life, mm-hmm. and that changes your mind.
Yes.
And the incident had to do with a child who I was doing a pediatrics rotation, and at the time, another pediatric rotation in nephrology had a very busy clinic, and they didn't have enough staff to take care of the patients. So, as being a senior medical student, they said, could you go help in that other clinic?
Okay.
I wasn't assigned to that specialty, but they said, go help. So I did.
Okay.
I went over there. It was just down the hall. And I went there, and I started seeing these young patients with kidney disease.
Oh.
And it was like nothing I'd ever seen in medical school.
Okay.
And to me, I didn't even know much about kidney disease. Yeah. I mean, you learn, of course, in medical school, but, I didn't have the in-depth learning about kidney disease.
Yeah.
And when I saw these patients and started talking to them and their families, it struck a chord with me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, wow, these patients are really sick.
Yeah.
And they're not the cancer type sick where they're going to die of their disease soon. Right. They're going to have this disease for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
And it's not easy.
Mm-hmm.
And during that clinic, I also saw young people who got transplants.
Yes.
And I saw that they were leading relatively normal lives.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, that's inspiring. They've suffered through this,
yes.
and then they were able to get a transplant and become normal, super normal, if
yes.
you will.
Yes.
And that led me then, I remember I went home that night and I started reading about nephrology.
Interesting.
And I thought to myself, wow, this is complicated.
Yeah.
I didn't know that nephrology was that complicated. This is pretty complicated.
Yeah.
And at that moment, I decided, you know what? I don't want to be a general pediatrician. I really want to be a specialist. I want to be someone who can help people with these complicated diseases. And then I thought, well, but pediatric nephrology is a very limited field, and I wanted a broader understanding of nephrology. Mm-hmm. And at that moment, I decided to do adult medicine.
Wow.
But that really wasn't when I decided to go into nephrology.
Okay.
That led me to pursue internal medicine. And then while I was in my internal medicine residency, I didn't want to be a nephrologist anymore.
Sure.
I wanted to be a cardiologist.
Wow.
And I was always fascinated by the cowboy nature of cardiology.
Yeah.
Oh, patient's having a heart attack. Bring them in. Take them to the cath lab. Put wires up their heart. Fix them.
Yes.
Balloon their arteries. And then they're fixed and they go home and they're doing great. And it's a very adrenaline rush type moment. Yes. And I wanted to be that person. Yes. But then towards my last year of residency, I started noticing a few important things. Because as you mature and you age in the training, you start to realize things and look at things a little differently. Yeah. And I realized two things happened. One is that when there was a complicated case, they often called the nephrologist. Mm-hmm. So the nephrologist was the one who people relied on to really be the critical thinker and to really sort through complexities of a case and try to find the best way to treat the patient. Yeah. And that was a consistent theme. It seemed to happen all the time. Mm-hmm. Not that any of the other specialties didn't know or they were excellent at what they did, but it was the nephrologist who kind of put it all together and gave the punchline, if you will. The second incident that happened was one case I had. It was a gentleman who had a brain tumor. Okay. And they removed the tumor, but in doing so, they had to remove a part of the brain that sent signals to the kidney on how to handle sodium balance. So the poor guy, who was in his 60s, one day his sodium would be extremely high in the blood. Mm-hmm. They would treat it. Next day it would drop really low. Yeah. They would treat that. Yeah. It would go really high. And every time it went high, he became unresponsive, obtunded. Yeah. Every time it dropped really low, he would have a seizure, and they would have to treat. So his poor life was just miserable. And here he was in the hospital for 2-3 weeks, and they couldn't get his sodium under control. Finally, they called the nephrologist. Mm-hmm. And when they called him, nephrologist came on board, looked at the case, within 24 hours stabilized the patient. Wow. Made changes, how the patient's treated. Mm-hmm. I was impressed by that. Yeah, magic. And really looking at how they thought through the case, how they calculated things, how they devised a treatment plan. Mm-hmm. It was really fascinating and amazing to me. Mm-hmm. And I began at that time to interact with the professor who came. Yeah. And his name is Dr. Steiner. He's retired now. Okay. He's my mentor, a person who I look up to in my life and who I've always tried to emulate because he's just a wonderful and fascinating person. Yeah. And I remember, and he's a very kind and yet very serious individual and a true intellectual. Yeah. And I remember we were on that. He was the one who managed that case and fixed the problem, and he did it with such ease that it was impressive. You know how some people do something and you look and like, wow, that's really but they do it so easily that to them it's second nature. Yes. And I kind of thought, I want to be like that. I want to learn that skill. Yeah. And I remember he came up to me and he said, Omar, why aren't you doing nephrology? Oh, man. I mean, he didn't ask me, what do you want to do? Right. What are you applying for? Right. None of that. Yes. He just straight to the point. Yep. Why aren't you doing nephrology? Yep. And I said, well, Actually, I've been thinking about it.
Yes. Yes. What did he say?
And he just looked at me and he said, well, there really is nothing else to do.
I love it. Were you dying laughing when he said that?
And I was just taken aback.
Yeah.
And I remember, I just didn't know what to say.
Yeah.
But what I told him is I said, well, I've been thinking about cardiology.
Okay.
And he looked at me and he said, the heart only has really one job. And I said, what is that, Dr. Steiner? Well, it just pumps blood to the kidney.
Yeah.
The kidney does everything.
I love it.
And I thought, wow, that's a simplistic view of life,
Yes.
but I see what he's saying.
Yeah.
And I went home that night and I said, I'm doing nephrology.
Yes.
That's it.
Got it.
It was a sealed deal. And I applied. Now, I had already lined up to be chief resident and a year of internal medicine, so I applied for the following year to go into nephrology. And they accepted me, and the rest is history.
Awesome.
And I did my nephrology training at San Diego, and then I was on faculty there, and then for about a year and a half or so, and then I left and came to private practice.
Yes.
But no regrets, and it's amazing how sometimes one incident, one person, can really steer your life in the right direction.
Yes.
I don't want to say in a different direction. I want to say in the right direction.
The right direction, yeah.
Because sometimes you get wrapped up in the hype or in the norms, and you start thinking of going in some directions that maybe that's not really where you should be going, and you need someone sometimes to help align you back into where you should be, what you should be pursuing, and I appreciate what he did, and I later talked to him about that after many years. He just retired recently, and he said, well, he said I could see that you think like a nephrologist, so I just couldn't imagine you in any other specialty.
That's great.
And that's why I told you should do nephrology. And I said, okay.
No, that's great. So has it been everything you thought it would be, nephrology?
So the reason for deciding on it was the intellectual challenge, the really sick patients, and the ability to help those patients and manage them and really get them through this lifelong illness. To me, that was a lot. It actually turned out in some aspects to be much better than I thought it would be.
Wow.
And in some aspects, much worse.
Okay.
The one thing I truly love about nephrology, which had nothing to do with why I went into it, but what I discovered is that in nephrology and only in nephrology, the relationship between the doctor and the patient is unique.
Yes.
And it's very tight.
Yes.
If you really think about it, we see our dialysis patients every week, every 2 weeks. No other specialties like that.
Right.
I mean, most other specialties, you might see the doctor once every 6 months, once every 3 months. We really develop a close relationship. We get to know our patients, and they get to know us.
Yes.
We get to know their personality. They know our personality. We get to know their families. We get to know their struggles, their celebrations, we live with them their life. Yes. And, I mean, frankly, I see sometimes my patients more than I see my extended family. That's just the truth.
Yeah.
And that relationship, to me, is gold.
Yes. It is.
It's gold.
Yes.
I make good money, okay,
Sure.
but it's not about the money.
Right.
I mean, you can make good money in any specialty, but that relationship is gold.
Yes.
I value that so much. I mean, throughout the years, I just had wonderful patients, and I've had wonderful relationships with them, and it could not happen in any other specialty but nephrology because of that day-to-day interaction, week-to-week interaction.
Right.
It's just extremely valuable.
Yeah.
And that's something I didn't know when I went into nephrology. I didn't know it was like that. Some things were not what I expected.
Yeah.
Nephrology is a very demanding field in terms of hours.
Yeah.
achieving a good work-life balance is not easy in nephrology. Yeah. It's very, very difficult. Yeah. I mean, surgeons maybe have a more difficult time, I would think, but then when you go into the medical specialties, I would say nephrology is probably one of the worst. Wow. It's just the time, commitment, and the timing of day commitment is such that it does take away from our lives as physicians. And you learn how to balance it and how to try to keep things in balance, but it's not what we expect when we go into the field. Yeah. And the reason is that it's a very complex field. Yes. I mean, you can, if you ask other physicians, they don't like to take care of kidney patients because of their complexity, because of their difficulty. Yeah. They really don't want to deal with that whole paradigm. Yeah. So it falls on us, and we do want to deal with it, and that's what we're trained to do. That's what we love to do. But it is time intensive and effort intensive, but we love it, and we do it with a passion. And if someone doesn't love nephrology, they can't survive in nephrology because it's so time consuming that it becomes your life. Yes. And if you don't like it, then you really don't have a life. Yes. And so, wow. But that's something that I didn't know when I went in. And initially I didn't like. Yes. I felt it was pulling time away from my wife, from my kids. I had to personally put in the effort to find a way to achieve balance. Yeah. And my wife is extremely supportive. My kids extremely understanding and supportive. Yeah. But I always feel like I haven't truly fulfilled my obligation to them. Yeah. In more recent years, I've been able to find that balance and try to make up for it. And I'm glad that I have done that. Yeah. But that part of my life I wish could have been better. Yes. Always. Yes. I can see that. Because I was gonna. The next question is, in fact, like at what point in your medical training did you meet your wife? Like, because we just spent almost an hour talking about how such a bad idea it is to date like during medical school, and how such a terrible idea it is to maintain a relationship in like. And if you're in residency, how it's just so rough. So I was gonna, because you're married with children. Yes. And you didn't. From what I've been able to gather, you didn't meet her and date her after you had finished residency. Like that must have happened somewhere. That must have happened like somewhere between med school and residency. I was gonna like the next question is how do you find that balance? Is it possible to meet somebody and maintain a relationship? Like, I think we've answered the question, like during med school it's just a terrible idea, don't even try it, but at least during residency, is it possible, and if it is, what happens after you've attained it, in that, like, how do you balance that out? Yeah, I met my wife during my last year of residency. Okay. And my wife is from Syria. Okay. Grew up there, and I met her through mutual friends. Yes. And I went to Syria and met her there. Okay. And then we maintained a long distance relationship for probably a year or so. So your last year of residency was the long distance relationship year. Yes. Wow. Yes. And that was a challenge. Yeah. But it worked well. And then we got married. What I did is that I took that chief resident year and I worked as an internist for a year. So those 2 years, my schedule was very manageable. Okay. I didn't have to take overnight call. Right. I didn't have to go in on the weekends. Yeah. So I had a much more normal type of life. Mm-hmm. And I think that was important because we got married during that time. Yeah. And in fact had our first child during that time. So those 2 years were a break in my life, if you will. Yeah. And that was important because it really afforded me the time to build a family. I see. And then after that, I went into nephrology, and it was downhill from there in terms of time. But like, sorry, babe, this is all a lie. Like, I tricked you. But My wife's been extremely supportive throughout
Yeah.
all this.
Yeah.
She's a gem, and
Yeah.
I have a son and a daughter,
Yeah.
and they're both right now doing very well,
Yeah. Yeah.
And I love them both, and
Yeah.
they both they've suffered through my
Yeah.
intense schedule
Yes.
when they were
Yes.
young. They're still young, but
Yeah.
but I think I've been able to find the balance,
Yes.
especially later in my career.
Yes.
And
If you
I'm glad
okay,
I
so
did.
two questions. So your last year of residency, you met her. I'm not sure what like. So were you looking to meet somebody, or did your friends have to cajole you into meeting this girl? Like, were you in your last year of residency? Was it starting to dawn on you like, oh, I should probably get a life. I should probably like meet somebody and raise a family? Or
It was starting to dawn on me.
Okay.
Yes. And as it does, I think, most residents.
Okay.
Most residents in their last year of residency, first year of work, they want to settle down.
Yes.
They want to really begin to have a life.
Yes.
And some of them pursue it in different ways, but it's a time when you realize that you're not that young anymore, and at the same time you're not old, and at the same time you just start working and you just start making some money.
Yes.
When you're a resident, they pay you very little.
Right.
You know.
I can't imagine.
And so you can actually afford to maybe start a family.
Okay.
And so it's kind of everything falls into place.
That makes sense.
And so a lot of people in their residency, 2-3 years into their residency, start thinking about that.
That makes sense.
And, so yes, no, I was definitely thinking about it at the time, and it all fell into place.
Okay. Yeah, because you started thinking about it, and when a person starts to think about something and they have I guess what I would call a blueprint for success, in that if they start thinking about a thing, there are certain principles nascent with successful people that they just do. So you put things out into the universe, and then you attract those things. So I have to imagine that your friends knew as well, and they're like,
yes.
oh, hey, there's this.
And there's a certain maturity at
Yes.
that point because of age, and you kind of know what you want,
Yes.
you know what you're looking for.
Yes.
You don't have to scramble through 20 experiments to
sense.
find out what you want to get to.
Yeah. So was the timing such that basically could you have pulled this off on your second year of residency, or truly you were in a place in your life on your third year that you were ready and you met her and you guys were...
Second year of residency is tough.
It's tough, okay.
I mean, there's not even time to think about that kind of thing.
I see.
I have many classmates who tried to establish their families and relationships in their second year.
Yeah.
It was tough.
Yeah.
It was very, very, very difficult. The only time that maybe it worked is if their relationship was with somebody who was also in a residency.
Okay.
Because then they're both busy. They both know what it's all about.
Yeah.
They both are living the experience. And there have been some successful relationships that came out of that.
That's cool.
It can work. It can work.
Yes.
But again, that's not very common. But it definitely can work.
Right. Okay. I mean, that's so awesome. Like that's so cool because, there's medical school has a reputation that's well deserved as far as you have no life, right? And then residency has a reputation that's also well deserved. It's like you can have a life, but it's just going to be like ruined, like you're
a miserable life.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like, is it even worth it? So certainly, that makes sense that towards the end of residency, those things you have time to think about those things, and and maybe a case could be made that you should you should think about those things.
It's time.
Yes,
it would be the right time because, it's a long time. I mean, we're talking about many years.
Yeah.
4 years of college, 4 years of medical school,
Right.
3 years of residency. I mean, that
That's
there
a
is an
lot.
11-year path.
Right.
And you kind of, by then most people are in their late 20s, early 30s, and they want to settle down. They want to have a normal life, if you will. And
Wow. Okay. So let's get into some science fiction. Right? Let's get into but here's what I mean by science fiction. Like, I'm not talking about like the Hugo Award winning science. So the transplant has been awesome, right? Transplant life has been awesome. I got so lucky on so many different ways, and I think the universe conspired to essentially save me in so many different ways. I can't. If there's any other reason for me to not dispense with the metaphysical and with the existence of God. I can look no further maybe than this even one thing. So, but that being said, we're forward thinking and trying to find all the new solutions. I think by April 2019, we're going to be looking at my 14th year of transplant life, which is awesome. And nevertheless, I know that there's the reality as well that transplants are not known to last forever. And I think the longest one on record is something like 40 years or something like that. And I would be lying to say that I don't want to break that record, because just for the sake of so many things, but also the advances in technology and medicine are astounding. And I think there's some time ago when we were talking about I think scientists were creating nephrons inside of rodents that could produce urine, which is insane, and how the possibility of your own stem cells being preserved, and the codes that create kidneys are extracted from those stem cells, and those kidneys are grown inside of pigs, and where they can once they're grown inside of pigs, they can be transplanted from the pig into you, and therefore you don't have to take the medications necessary to suppress the immune system, because they're genetically your own kidneys. These are extreme. When at the sound of them, that's why I call it science fiction, because it just sounds so wild. But the truth is, the possibilities are real. These ideas have been toyed with, I think, and because these possibilities are toyed with, that means that the future is even more there's people out there who had thought about this years ago, and it takes time and money to do them. So can you elaborate on the future of the future options of renal failure, basically?
Sure. So first of all, the advances that have been made in the past 20 years are just tremendous and mind-boggling, and they do sound like science fiction, although they are real science and real life.
Yeah.
I remember when I was first in nephrology, which was about 20 years ago or so, 19 years ago, there was a visiting lecturer who came and gave a talk at the university.
Yeah.
And we all thought he was crazy.
Yes.
I mean, he was talking about growing kidneys in a lab from stem cells.
Yes.
And not just kidneys, but other organs too, hearts and this and that.
Yeah.
And he was one of those guys who was, never saw patients, but was sitting in the lab all day. And very smart, knew all the literature. And he outlined how they were going to do this. And we were just starting, and here we are. We just came from the bedside of someone with a creatinine of 14, and which is full-blown kidney failure, and we were going to start dialysis, and we got this crazy professor, kind of this mad scientist trying to do crazy things with stem cells, and we just laughed it off. I mean, we just thought this is nuts. This is a dream. This guy's dreaming. Fast forward, just this year, in fact, they have grown kidneys from stem cells.
Here in the United States?
No, this was in the UK.
Okay.
And here in the United States, they have adopted that technology, so there is a company trying to do that. But in the UK, they did grow kidneys.
Wow.
And it did make urine.
Wow.
So, yes, it filtered the blood of a mouse.
Wow.
And the next step, of course, is going to be how to make that a reality in humans.
Yes.
And I think it will happen. I think it's just a matter of time.
Yes.
The technology is there.
Yep.
Now the focus is on feasibility and safety. How can they really do this on a mass scale?
Right.
And how safe is it?
Yes.
And I think those things will sort themselves out. It'll probably take another decade, but I think it will become a reality.
Okay.
And that will really be a major advance.
Yes.
And we shouldn't really think that that's impossible, because right now you may have heard of biologics, where people are using immunotherapy to treat all kinds of diseases like rheumatoid arthritis, Crohn's disease, cancer.
It's just kind of like I read this one thing where someone's using the AIDS virus to battle cancer, or something using cancer to battle something like that. Like
similar, they're using antibodies and to deliver chemotherapy to the cancer and kill it.
Interesting, and so cool.
And this is reality. People are getting the treatment.
Yeah.
I mean, they actually advertise it on TV.
Yeah, it still sounds like science fiction, but yeah.
But I remember even that people were talking about that 20 years ago and thought that was crazy. But it's become a reality. I think this kidney stem cell issue will become a reality. It's just a matter of time.
Yes.
Other technologies that people are working on, which are actually quite fascinating. I know up at San Francisco, there's a group working on an implantable dialysis device.
Wow.
So this would be something they would put in under the skin, connect to the bladder, and connect to the major blood vessels, and it would filter the blood. Huh. So it's an artificial device that can be implanted, and they actually are doing human trials right now.
Wow. How big is this device? Like this?
It's probably the size of a Rubik's Cube.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. And
maybe a little bigger.
Into a person. Yeah. Okay.
So it's quite fascinating, actually. And that is a major advance. If that really can work, because it would then, and it won't be for everybody. Obviously, there will be some limitations, but it would obviate the need for people to come to a dialysis center and sit in a chair for 4 hours.
Yes, of course.
They could do it at home, just go about their lives.
How far away are we from that? Or they
are doing human trials now.
Okay.
So I would think 5 years away.
Yeah.
There are a lot of issues.
Yes.
The battery lasting, the filter lasting, how do you change it out? So there are a lot of complexities to it, but I think they will sort through that technology.
Agreed.
There's also a group here in Los Angeles that's working on what's called a WAC, a WAK, which is a wearable artificial kidney.
Interesting.
And they've come out. They had version 1, now version 2, then they're coming out with version 3.
Okay.
And the first one started out with a backpack. So this would be a backpack that would be hooked up to the blood vessels of the patient, so the blood would circulate through it, and then it would collect in a bag, and that would be like the urine, and it would empty. And the technology of that also has advanced to where it's become much smaller, so patients can wear it under their clothes. It's not visible. And it's external, so there's no implanting and surgery. But there's a small surgery to connect it to the blood vessel. But other than that, it's all external. Yeah. And people can go about their lives, and while they're going about their lives, they can be dialyzed. And it gives them a lot of freedom in terms of their lifestyle, but also freedom of diet. Right now, people on dialysis have a restricted diet. There are a lot of things they can't eat.
Right. It was really rough.
With these technologies, the blood is being cleansed daily, so really there's no limitation on what they can eat because whatever toxins are generated are being removed in real time.
Right.
And so that's a major advance. And they've done some human trials on this device as well, and it was very successful. These things will take time for the FDA to approve them and for them to come to market. And usually when they first release these kinds of technologies, it's not for everybody. They limit the scope, so they usually put criteria on who can receive these therapies. And once it's successful in that very select group of patients, then they start expanding the criteria and allow more and more patients. And that's not unusual. That's pretty typical in most medical technologies that have come about. Even dialysis started only a select group of patients, and then it expanded. So I think it sounds like science fiction, but it's real. It's real science, and it's fascinating.
I call it science fiction because I know it's real, and I know that we can't fight the future. I know technology progresses in spite of you and me. I know that. I just call it science fiction because it sounds so outlandish and it sounds so crazy. But the truth is, I was told that I had 10 to 15 years with this, right? And I know why I was told that. Obviously, I want to extend that as long as I can, but I'd be lying if I said it wasn't in the back of my head that someday it's going to come back for me, and I want to be more ready for that day when it comes or if it comes versus last time. And like I said, last time I think I got really lucky. So this time, at least I'll know what to be ready for. But at the same time, there's very few doomsday scenarios or worst case scenarios that don't take into account human innovation. So that's why when if the shit were to hit the fan, not only would I obviously consult with you and consult with the current treatments and literature, but also with the future literature, because one of my goals, it's just as a personal evolution over maybe the last year and a half. One of my goals is to be like, I don't even know how else to say it, but one of my goals is to be like stupid, ungodly, obnoxiously filthy rich. Not because I want a lot of money, but because I want freedom. I want that amount of freedom, yes. Right? And so for example, I'm imagining if, let's say I can't, it's not going to look like, hey, Dr. Bean, how's it going? How do I apply to get the stem cell grown kidney? You know what I mean? And by the way, I make $50K a year. Like, it's not, I know, like, I'm not that dumb. But I know my chances are better if I'm like, hey, I have a net worth of like 50 million, right? So, I don't hate the game. I'm much more like, if this is the game that is played, I would like to learn the rules and I'd like to practice, and I want to play to win. So how far away, I guess that's $1 million question, because it could cost that much, but like, how far away is obviously I've zeroed in on the stem cell, like how long does it even take to grow a kidney from a stem cell?
It doesn't take very long to grow the kidney.
Yeah.
The real question is, at least from what I've read, is how long can you sustain the kidney? So growing it is easy, but will it continue to operate for many years?
I see.
And that's what they're trying to perfect.
That makes sense. Because only in theory is it genetically mined, but everything else, whether it lasts and whether, that makes sense.
So that's the critical issue. On a more immediate note, the medications that we have and the management of the immune system and our understanding of how the immune system works has advanced tremendously also in the past 20 years.
Oh.
So now, if people have a transplant and that transplant fails, they can get a second one.
Okay.
And successfully.
Okay.
People have always had second transplants. That's not new.
Yeah.
But a lot of times the second one doesn't work as well as the first one,
right.
because of the changes in the immune system. And it's easier to reject that second one.
Interesting.
Because the body is sensitized already to a foreign body.
I see.
And so that's not the case anymore.
Okay.
People can do very well with a second transplant.
Okay.
The therapies that are available are definitely much better than in the past. And so that still is a reality. Part of the problem, though, is we don't have enough donors.
Yes.
And we have a lot more patients in need of a kidney than there are who are willing to donate a kidney.
Yes.
And that's really a shame. I would encourage everyone listening to this podcast to really think about becoming a donor.
Okay.
And you can do that by going to the DMV and saying you're a donor, and they'll put a sticker on your driver's license. And it's really amazing. I think it's the biggest accomplishment anyone can ever make in their life is to be able to give life to someone else.
Yes.
And nothing really does that as much as donating an organ. It's truly an honorable thing and truly a noble thing to do.
Yeah.
We just don't have enough donors. I mean, that's really the reality, and it's a sad reality.
Yes.
But I think that we're getting there. Hopefully with these other technologies, with better medications to manage current kidney transplants so they last longer.
Yeah.
We're making headway as a nephrology community in treating kidney disease.
Okay.
The stem cell thing is fascinating.
Yes.
And I think that is going to be the future.
That is the future.
I think one day we're going to be where the patient will come, and instead of saying, you need to go to dialysis, we're going to say, we need to harvest your stem cells and get them processed and inject them in you, and you need to grow a kidney because your own kidney is going to fail in the next 6 months.
That is insane. That is insane.
I think that's going to be the future.
Yeah, I can't even imagine a world like that, but that's insane. That's real.
It's real, and it's fascinating, and I think it's going to happen.
Yeah.
I think it's just a matter of crystallizing the process and time to test it and make sure that it's safe. But I think that's where we're heading.
Okay.
And it's going to be revolutionary, no question
Yes,
about it.
yes.
Same way dialysis was revolutionary.
For sure.
I mean, people used to just die of kidney disease.
Yes.
We didn't used to have any treatment
Right.
before dialysis came on board in the 1960s.
Yes.
Prior to that, if you open old medical textbooks from the 1940s, pretty much the description of end-stage kidney disease is a one-page document.
It's just
saying that patients live for 14 days and then they die.
Yes.
That's
yeah.
it.
It's like,
that was it.
Yeah. I remember asking you once like what would have happened had I not gone back to the urgent care the second time, because the first time, all the signs were there, but I was just in such denial that I take full responsibility, because they saw my blood pressure and they were just like, has this been happening? Has that been happening? Has this been happening? And I'm just like, no, everything's fine. No. So then I tell my mom, who's a nurse, and then she flips out because I didn't know what 195 over 130 whatever blood pressure meant. So she's just like, I can't believe they sent you home. You have to go back right now. And all I wanted to do was sleep. Like, that's all, because I'd been dealing with this for so long. And I go back the next day, and then the blood pressure is like 230 over 150 or something, and they're just like, we're gonna send you to the ER. So then I remember asking you, what if I never went back? What if it just And then you said if I was awake, it would have been a heart attack, and if I was asleep, I would have drowned. Like, I would have drowned in my own stuff.
That's correct.
And it's just terrible. Like, that's just like, wow, because the nights were feeling like that, like I was drowning. Yeah. And during the day it would feel like my heart exploded sometimes, and I was somehow still alive.
See, what really happens in kidney failure is the kidney's job is to get rid of toxic waste, poisons.
Yeah.
But also to get rid of excess water. We drink water because our body cells need water to do all their functions, but we generally drink more than our body needs.
Yes.
And so the excess water, which is really what flushes out, if you will, the toxins, is needed. So we encourage people to drink a lot of water.
Yeah.
And that water has to come out. Now, when the kidney fails, two things happen. You can't get rid of the toxic material, and you can't get rid of the excess water.
Yeah.
And so it accumulates.
Yeah.
And the toxic materials can cause the heart to stop beating, which is the most dangerous thing, and people can die of a heart attack.
Yeah.
Not truly a heart attack, but the heart just stops beating. Or they retain so much water that it starts filling up in the lung.
Yes.
And it's like drowning. You can't breathe anymore.
Yeah.
And that's a horrible sensation.
That was probably the worst. That was probably the worst thing that I remember, because it went from 3 times a week to every night from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. Like, I just wake up and I knew something was wrong. Like, gas exchange was not happening, with breathing, and it just sounded like gurgling. And it's kind of terrifying when it's your own gurgling.
Yes.
And so I'm just like, oh man, it took a lot, but yeah, it's so important. It's more to your previous point. Sonia has said, my donor has said that like donating to me was the greatest thing she's ever done. And like, she's married now with 2 kids, and it's to me, I think that's also something great that a person does that changes them forever. But I take her sacrifice very seriously, right? Like, ever since then, I've tried to live life in a way that helps me self-actualize for the sake of inspiring other people to self-actualize. And so much of this podcast was to help spread that message. And it's just it's.
I mean, I'll tell you, I have been doing this for, like I said, 18, 19 years now.
Yeah.
I have never met a donor who's regretted donating.
No.
Never.
Right.
They all, without exception, not even once, they all have told me they would do it again if they had a chance.
Okay, awesome.
And that means a lot. I think that really tells us a lot.
Yes.
About people, about the whole process of donating an organ. It's a very altruistic thing to do, and very personally satisfying to those who have done it. And they will all tell you that it's changed their outlook on life.
Yes.
For the better.
Oh my God.
And I think that it's really courageous on their part to come forward and donate an organ.
Yeah.
And I would encourage more people to consider it.
Yeah.
I think it's quite a selfless act, and there are so many stories. I mean, I could probably sit here for 5 hours telling you about donor stories and how the most amazing things have happened. I remember a gentleman who I still see in the office. He didn't have any family members who could donate to him.
Yeah.
and he was on dialysis for 10 years. He was a difficult blood type, wasn't able to get a kidney.
Yeah.
And he went to church,
Mm-hmm.
and he wasn't like religious. He didn't normally go to church, but decided one day to go to church.
Yep.
He did. Shared his predicament with some of the people there, and someone announced that someone needs a kidney, and a random person in church he's never met before stood up and said, "I want to donate my kidney."
Insane.
Well, it turned out to be almost a perfect match.
Insane.
I mean,
Insane.
what are the chances of
what
that
are the chances?
happening?
Yeah.
Donated.
Yep.
Donor's happy.
Yep.
Recipient is happy.
Yep.
I mean, it's the most amazing thing. The match was almost perfect.
Yep.
They're both now, it's been a long time since he's had the transplant and been doing very well. And you just think and you just say, wow, that's there's just something about kidney donation that is very unique and works in mysterious ways.
Yes.
It really does.
It's really a magical thing. It's really, because I'll admit, after that, it did change my mind too. But then I was told immediately after the transplant, because of the nature of my blood now and how it's like things are different with all my meds, I can't even donate blood. Like I can't be a donor myself.
Correct.
So what a slap in the face, dude. Like yeah, you should really do this. I'm like, okay, I'm ready. And they're like, no, not you, bro. Like not you can't. So, it's if you're out there and you're listening, and if you are able to, it really is something special. And I'm not going to try to delineate the difference between creating life and giving life and saving life, but I feel like it's all kind of you get to participate in creation itself, and it's help to perpetuate life itself, and it's something that is it'll be with you forever, and it'll be with that person forever. So I should really get you out of here, but I have so many other questions too, like on the state of like medical care in the U.S. and blah blah blah. But I feel like we should end this on our long-standing project, our book.
Yes.
And so I feel also we're going to use this as a personal accountability thing as well, because we're 14 years in. Like Dr. Abdeen and I have been talking about writing a joint book together on this subject for such a long time, and sometimes he's ready, sometimes I'm not, and sometimes I'm ready and he's not. And it's funny because as year 4 became year 8, became year 10, became year 12, it's like the book itself changes. Like the theoretical book, especially maybe the ending will change. But I think this podcast is a good indication of what the themes of the book will be. But do you want to give like a small kind of summary of what our intent is with the book?
Yes. So we've been talking about this for a very long time, and it's mostly my fault that we were delayed. I have to admit that. Yeah. Mainly because just demands of work and life and whatnot. But it's always in the back of my mind, and I'm always thinking about it because I think it's a worthwhile project.
Very much.
And the idea was that we would jointly write a book. Mm-hmm. That offered the perspective of a kidney patient who has lived through the whole spectrum of kidney treatment, dialysis, kidney transplantation, and so forth, with a very positive outcome, with a lot of bumps in the road.
Yes.
Life for Zeb as a kidney patient has not been easy.
Yeah.
I know he makes it, when you hear him, it sounds very easy, but it really has not been that easy, and it never is for any kidney patient. Yeah. So to share his story openly, I think is, number one, noble on his part, and will really be a tremendous service to many patients and families where kidney disease is present. And my role will actually be fairly small. I'm just going to talk about the science of it and how we treat kidney disease, what it's all about. My part's the boring part of the book. His part is the exciting part of the book.
Oh, I mean,
and it's I'll try to make mine a little bit exciting, but I mean it can get boring very quickly when you start talking science. But we'll make it readable in layman's terms and something that everyone can appreciate. And the goal is for it to help people who currently have kidney disease, people who've had a transplant, people who have a loved one who has kidney disease, where they can have a resource other than WebMD, other than the Mayo Clinic website, other than National Kidney Foundation website, a real personal type of story,
Yes.
Both from a patient and a physician. So
Yes.
even my part is going to be science, but there's going to be some of my personal experience in there as well.
Yeah.
And sometimes that helps. I find sometimes when you read medical literature and science, it's dry and
Yes.
it's tough to understand.
Yeah.
And sometimes you look on a lot of people now, everyone goes to Google, Dr. Google has become very famous.
Yeah.
And they look for information on Google, and that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with that. But sometimes you get conflicting information.
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't get the full story. You get some part of the story. And most of the time, you don't get that personal human element of the story.
Yes.
And I think that most patients and their families need that and deserve that.
Yeah.
And they really should have that. And you can go to a support group. I mean, a lot of people have been to support groups where people sit around a table and talk about their story, and I think those are helpful. But this is going to be more of a private support group.
Yes.
It's something where you can open that book and sit down and read it in the privacy of your own home and just kind of think about what you read and how it applies to your life. Yeah. And our intent also is to be accessible to those who have questions and who want to ask more and learn more and to really be out there. So that's the goal. When this is going to happen, I don't know.
Okay.
But we will definitely announce it when it happens, and it'll be available to everybody. And we're not trying to make money out of this.
Right.
This is more of a project of passion, not part of our entrepreneurial endeavors. And we both have entrepreneurial endeavors, but this isn't one of them. This is more our passion and our life story that we want to tell.
Yeah.
So more to come on that in the future.
That's the book. Yeah, it's funny because I've enjoyed writing since I was a little boy, and I would like to think that I've tried to improve over the years as far as just being compelling to read and being like there's an art to writing in such a way that it's a page turner and keeping the attention, whatever. But I did journal all the things that happened in real time at the time. So when my kidneys were failing, I was writing about it. When I had to go to dialysis, I was writing about it, and the transplant, I was writing about it. And I write now on blogs and my social media stuff. But I feel like this is the one time where we can consolidate some of those things into a useful tool that we can leverage towards just more awareness, and as any goal setter and successful person will know, that there should at least be some attempted date to, because if we just leave it as just this amorphous thing, it's like 14 years has gone by so fast, and I don't want another 14 years to go by and then we still haven't written it. So it's November 2018 almost, right? It's like it's late October. It's October 21st, 2018. Can we aim for something like early 2019, at least to have the first 2 chapters down, or to at least have like?
I think that's a good goal.
Okay.
I think we should set a deadline.
Yes.
I think we should set to have a first draft of the book complete.
Yes.
By December of next year.
December of next year. Okay.
First draft of the book, not just the 2 chapters.
Yes, I agree.
I think that's something we really should aspire to.
Yes.
I wear many hats in my work, and one of those hats is going to be coming off December 31st.
Yes.
Which is going to provide me more time.
Oh, okay.
Good. And because I'm involved in the hospital governance and all that, so I'm going to be out of that.
Good.
And I'm looking forward to it, and it's going to give me more time.
Yes.
So I think setting a goal of November, December of 19 is a realistic goal to try to finish this book.
Very reasonable.
At least the first draft.
Yeah, that's fine. I can work with that.
Revise and
Yeah, because to be fair too, like a lot of my when I was writing about it, it's very raw and it's very like grammatically and whatever. It just needs to be edited. It's unedited. And it's unfiltered, and so I feel like I should clean it up a little bit for a wider audience. But I think I could wrap. I think that's a very reasonable goal, and we just sat here and talked about how important it is to put out there. So we kind of have to now.
Right.
And now that if you're listening to this podcast, give us a hard time and just tell us that we need to do it. But so usually at the end of a podcast, there's a section I call like sell your shit, which is essentially if you're a business person, whatever, like market yourself. But obviously you're in a different field. But if anyone has questions, or if anyone wants to contact you with any more questions, whether it's about the podcast or anything, what is your point of contact for them? Like how can they contact you?
So they could. The best way is through calling my office.
Okay.
Would probably be the best way.
Okay.
Or via email is also good. I try to be good about responding to emails in a timely fashion, although sometimes I'm not.
Yes.
And it's not because I'm trying to ignore or anything like that. It's just time management issue. But I definitely try to be on top of that.
Are you allowed to give your email here?
Yeah, I can. It's Abdeen, Abdeen.
Yep.
At kidneyconsultants.net.
Okay.
So the KidneyConsultants.
Yes.
.net.
Okay, perfect.
Consultants.net.
Yeah. And if you're trying to reach out to him as a result of this podcast, then just reference the Pascual Project podcast on this title, and he'll know that it was from this. That's cool.
Great.
Good. Doc, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
This was so fun. Like things I've never learned, things I never knew about you. It's now like for me and for the rest of the world. So no HIPAA rules are violated in the making of this episode. And until next time, I will talk to you later.